Hi, how are you? I'm Mr. Muso. Today we want to talk about the causes of the Second World War. What led the European powers to fight against each other in 1939? In 1939, the European powers, we see them fighting against each other. We see them fighting against each other in the so-called the Second World War. We want to look on the causes that led to the Second World War. Number one, we'll talk about the foreign policies of Hitler and Mussolini. The acts of aggression of Hitler, they contributed to the war of 1939. We see that Hitler, when he came to power in 1933, he moved out of the Geneva Disarmament Conference. A week later, he moved out of the League of Nations. These aggressive acts culminated to the war in 1939, the war which we are calling the Second World War. We also see that Hitler did not stop there. He went on to take the Saar Basin. Remember, the Saar Basin had been taken away from Germany on the Versailles settlement. Hitler went to the Saarlanders and a plebiscite was held. When it was held, the Saarlanders were restored back to Germany. This act of aggression again culminated to the war in 1939. We move on, we also talk about Hitler. He moved on to the demilitarized zone of Rhineland. The Rhineland had been demilitarized on the Versailles settlement in 1919. So Hitler here, he remilitarized, started training the soldiers again at the Rhineland, again endangering Europe, which eventually led to the war of 1939. We move on, we also talk about Hitler. He had to sign a secret treaty with Britain, the so-called the Strasser Front. This again led to the war because the signing of treaties was forbidden on the Versailles settlement. He did not stop there. He had to sign another treaty in 1936, the Rome-Berlin Axis, later on the Rome-Berlin-Tokyo Axis. The signing of these treaties led to the war of 1939. Then we move on, we also talk about Hitler taking the Anskolas, Hitler taking the Sudetenland, Hitler later on taking the whole of Czechoslovakia. That on its own led Europe to be plunged into another war. This was because these acts of aggression angered the other powers, leading to the war of 1939. Hitler eventually had to sign the Pact of Steel, the non-aggression pact with Russia, which was his last treaty before attacking Poland, invading Poland in 1939. Again, this led to the war of 1939. We see that Mussolini, when he also came to power, his foreign policy, it was aggressive. In 1935, he invaded Ethiopia or Abyssinia. Later on, we see him signing the Rome-Berlin Axis, the Rome-Tokyo Axis, and we see him invading Albania. These acts of aggression led to the war of 1939. So we are saying that the acts of aggression by Mussolini, by Hitler, culminated to the war of 1939. The foreign policies of these dictators led to the World War II. There were other factors that also led to the World War II. This was because of the harshness of the Versailles settlement. The Versailles settlement ruled a dictator in the name of Hitler. He wanted to revenge. He wanted to do away with the diktat settlement that had been dictated to the people in Germany. So the Versailles settlement, which was a harsh settlement, which led Germany to lose the territory, which meant Germany to reduce their armies, which reduced Germany to a third power state, led to the World War II. Why? It is because a spirit of revenge was brewed, and when it was brewed, it led to the coming of Hitler, who eventually wanted to repossess all those areas, the territories that Germany lost on this Versailles settlement. We move on, we also talk about the absence of USA from the League of Nations. USA was the country that had suggested the formation of the League of Nations, which was supposed to guarantee a peace in Europe, but USA never joined the League of Nations. The failure of USA to join the League of Nations also led to the World War II. Then also talk about the League of Nations. It was a toothless bulldog. It just made a lot of noise without taking decisive action. The failure of the League of Nations to punish the aggressors, to act on what Mussolini and Hitler were doing, also led this it led also to the Second World War. Their failure to guarantee peace led to the Second World War. Then the war also took place. Why? It is because of the rise of dictators. You talk about the rise of dictators in Europe. The rise of Mussolini, the rise of Hitler also led to the war of 1939. We also see that the Great Depression led to the World War II in 1939. Europe was plunged into the Great Depression. The Great Depression, why? Because USA, which was sustaining the economies of so many countries in Europe, it was now facing serious economical challenges in its own country. That on its own had to spread to these countries that were also being assisted, leading to the War of 1939. So we've got so many causes, so many factors that led to the War of 1939. For today, let's end here. I'm Mr. Muso. Thank you.